I was toying with this idea for last more than 2 decades, isn't it? Uh, I had presented a paper at the international conference in 2004, in which I had discussed, geopsychology of India and Pakistan. Uh, and then that paper was published, and I was encouraged, and my friends really they uh, gave me so much of confidence that you can write a full length book. So it was very difficult for me that, first of all, the Western dominated world will never accept, a theory coming from non-Western scholar.
Non-Western.
Yeah, so that was a very big problem. But I was simply thinking, so okay, I was not sure that I will be able to uh, produce a theory like geopsychology. But 9/11 again, I was at the time I was visiting a scholar at the University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Very, and at the time 9/11 took place, I was there. So I just thought that why these things are happening. Why conflicts, why violence, why bloodshed, and all that. So that idea was really puzzling me like anything. Uh, then I presented another paper. There also I was given a lot of encouragement by my colleagues and by students also. I was teaching a course at Cleveland State University, CSU, Ohio, and there was part of geopsychology as a matter of fact there. And I told my students that on who will produce the best paper, I will award A plus. So it was the year 2013. Then in the year 2017, I was visiting professor at the University of British Columbia, Canada, and that was really a university that offered me a lot of opportunity. And my colleague, professor and head department of political science, economics, and philosophy. There are three departments, isn't it? And three departments are run by one professor as a chairperson. Professor of political science, professor of history, and professor of philosophy. So we had very wonderful sessions, over tea of sometimes over tea, sometimes coffee, sometimes breakfast, sometimes over lunch. So we used to discuss a lot of things, and he appreciated my idea really very well. I was doing something on China. He said, "Well, I'm interested in China. If there is anything, you please." Thereafter, I sent the proposal to the publisher and I talked to the senior editor. And look here, it's highly controversial. I'm not sure whether this geopsychology, the concept of geopsychology will appeal to you, because you will ultimately be sending out the proposal, isn't it, or the project to your to the well-known scholars in the field of IR, maybe in Harvard University or Yale or Stanford University. But I assured and reassured him that okay, I will I will definitely produce a good book based on case studies, and I had more than 2 hours talk. You will wonder, because he was interested in the proposal. So our conversation prolonged for 122 uh, minutes. And ultimately, he said, Professor Jain, you please send me a brief background, your your background, as well as also the rationale of the geopsychology. What is the rationale and what is geopsychology as a matter of fact? So this is how I sent the proposal, and then the board meeting took the decision. Okay, it is very controversial, but even then it is very interesting because geoeconomics, and you know, uh, constructivism were unable to offer the explanation behind the ongoing events, violence, ongoing conflicts in different parts of the world. Okay, so geopolitics has failed and even failed to explain the demise of the Soviet Union in December 1991. So I was prodded, isn't it? Okay, then I offered this idea of geopsychology by taking up case studies, isn't it, of India and Pakistan in the Middle East, then China, North Korea, then America in Middle East, Afghanistan, all that. Now, this is a very brief background of geopsychology. But what is geopsychology, as a matter of fact? I deliver
Right.
lecture. Now, is a set of geopsychology is a set of perceptions, images, and belief system formed of ethnicity, nationalism, religion, culture pertaining to people, scholars, individuals living in a specific geographical area.
Right.
Means perceptions and belief system of the people. For instance, you are living in a specific area of Kashmir. So, what are your perceptions? It is geographic induced perception, geographic induced perception of the people. Isn't people inhabiting in a particular geographical area, and how their perceptions, images, and belief system have been formed out of nationalism, out of ethnicity, out of religion, out of history, out of geography. Geography is also included.
Yes, of course. Geography, different areas have got different
Yeah.
geography, different
So I
that defines their cultures also.
yeah
South Asia has got a different culture. We are civilizationally very different.
yeah, you're right. So I have applied it to, for instance, Afghanistan, that America failed to understand perceptions, images, and belief system of the people of Afghanistan, because
Right.
they have their social code, they have social code, religious code. They don't have even the adequate knowledge. Americans did not have the adequate knowledge, the poor knowledge, I should say, about Afghanistan. And America could have saved, trillions of dollars, isn't it? It was simply, wasteful
Disaster.
expenditure, and it did not get anything. Even though America thought that being a superpower, I will be able to dominate, Afghanistan, Iraq, and all that. So that did not happen. Similarly, Chinese geopsychology. I published an article on China's geopsychology, isn't it? That was published a year earlier than my book. That was published in the International Journal of Chinese Studies. So now, picking up these clues from uh, different elements, a wide set of elements of that is of nationalism, culture, history, and all that. Now, you're you are interested to know about
The
uh,
geopsychology as well. Sir,
yeah,
if I make it as a question answer format, I would like to ask you questions and accordingly, if you may answer,
yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah,
we cooperate upon the discussion.
yeah,
All right. All right, sir. I will give a formal introduction because this part I have been getting introduced to you and you were talking about your book. So for my friends, dear friends, I'm introducing to you Professor B.M. Jain. He is a political scientist who is also the editor-in-chief of Indian Journal of Asian Affairs. He is the author of the Geo-Psychology Theory of International Relations in the 21st Century, Escaping the Ignorance Trap. It's a groundbreaking book, and we shall try to understand the concept, particularly in context of Ukraine. So very glad to have you with me, Professor. Welcome on board. You're very welcome.
thank you.
Professor, as you were at your as you introduced yourself, you talked about geopsychology in international relations. Now, given that we understand that it's based on the ethnicity, the religious concepts, the culture of a place, how do we uh, how do we say that this concept, this behavioral concept, which is very new to international relations within the nations, is different from the idealistic point of view and the realistic point of view in the international relations, or is it a balance between both the idealism and the realism?
Thank you. It's a good question. What happened? International system has undergone several phases. Uh, During the Cold War era, the concept of geopolitics dominated international politics. That is from 1945 to 1990. Okay, that concept was dominant. And you raised a question regarding idealism. So, but international politics is never based on idealism. Scholars have written on idealism in international relations, but when it comes to the ground reality, we find that foreign policy and diplomacy uh, are structured on hardcore realism. So we should not undermine the importance of hardcore national interests. Because every country, though even though president or prime minister may be idealistic, maybe an idealist, isn't it? But he or she cannot afford because ultimately it is people's perception that matter. Because it is the vote politics. In a democracy, you have to, uh, you know, please your audience, isn't it? Your constituency, and therefore even you want that, okay, I should pursue an ideal policy, or I should traverse on the idealistic principles, but in practice it is not possible, because politics as a matter of fact is a power game. Politics is nothing but is a power game, isn't it? And in that power game you have to make so many compromises. So what happened? Geopolitics means the importance of a geographical area from political point of view, and therefore what happened that India's non-aligned policy based on idealism, as you may call it, that India's foreign policy of non-alignment based on idealism, isn't it? It did not work. Did not work. Though it was a very good policy, because non-aligned policy is good because you don't want to indulge yourself in superpower contest. At the time, there was superpower contest between United States and America, isn't it? But their because of their ideological cleavages, ideological conflicts, created more and more conflicts rather than bringing peace in war-torn areas. For instance, in Korea in 1950 to 1953, the first Korean War took place. Then in Vietnam also. Okay, so it created more and more conflicts rather than bringing the conditions of peace. Okay.
Right, sir. How do you view the international relations scenario of this 21st century? Give us your broad perspective in comparison to the older concepts of international relations. What's your perspective with regard to the international relations of 21st century? Because there's a drastic change, as you yourself said in the previous question, that from an ideological point of view, now we have shifted to the hardcore realism. And it's all about yourself, how you save yourself. It's all about survival now, the
Yes,
best way to survive in the international arena.
I appreciate your question. Uh, what we need to understand that three important terms student of international relations must understand: international relations, international politics, and international system. Okay. So international system, everything operates within international system, whether it is international relations or international politics. International relations very simply define, relations between or among nations, isn't it? Okay. So different nature, different, the nature of international relations, because there are so many components of international relations. Those components, for instance, political relations, economic relations, strategic relations, defense, security relations, etc., etc. So very simple. Now, international politics is a power politics, because every country wants to garner every country wants to garner, increase, stabilize one's power. Now, this is a simple fact. India, which was known as a intermediate power, a poor nation, isn't it, described by America? At the time, one could not imagine that India and America would come so closer that there is not a single space in which they have not cooperated. And now, as you know it, in AUKUS, for instance, America has included, Britain or Australia and all that. But what is important here is that now India's status as a rising global power, isn't it, has compelled America that it should improve, strengthen, and stabilize the US relations with India. So, from that angle, there have been four major revolutions in international relations. The first revolution took place in 1945 because earlier there was European dominated or Europe centric international system. Now, international system, everything takes place within the system that is known as international system. So, first of all, there was Europe centric international system. Because you raised this question, thereafter, another revolution took place. After the end of the Second World War, it was bipower politics. It was, bipolar paradigm. There were only two powers, isn't it? United States and the Soviet Union. Thereafter, a third revolution took place when 9/11 occurred, isn't it? Then the world was characterized as interdependent world order. Interdependent world order because America alone cannot resolve critically important issues, that is non-military issues, non-military threats. So non-military threats like terrorism or environmental problems, environmental degradation, isn't it, cannot be resolved alone by America or by a configuration of powers. So that was the third revolution, isn't it? 9/11 had shaken up, the world order. Look here like that. Now, with the rise of China, now the fourth revolution took place with the rise of China as a global player in the international system. This is very interesting. Now, it is a mere accident or by design of nature, whatever you may call it, that after the demise of the Soviet Union, who was the main beneficiary? It was just a chance that India could not become, India could not take the place of Soviet Union, could not replace, but China benefited, isn't it? China was the major beneficiary. Otherwise, China would not have, got the opportunity to become power number two after America. So, what is the nature of international system? Please, I always tell my students that please understand international system is always in the state of fluidity, isn't it? It is fluid. It is never permanent. It is never static. We don't understand how it had it happened. People, because in my class, I told you, students used to talk about U.S. hegemony, and people like Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book on hegemony. Okay, so I had a lot of opportunity to discuss with these so-called stalwarts of international relations in Washington D.C. and in seminars and conferences there. So this is how unite the international relations. Have emerged from time to time. Emerge from shocks. I use the word shocks, isn't it? Because when there is some particular kind of a shock, isn't it? Then a new spirit is born. A new spirit is born, isn't it? That who will
Would it be?
guide the
Would it mean? Would it mean that war is a shock? So after
shock?
every
Yeah,
war, we have a new system.
because shock means demise of the Soviet Union was a very big shock.
That too, it is a
9/11 was a very big shock.
big shock.
It
So
was a
every
very
time there's a conflict, there's a shock.
yeah. So it was a very shattering experience because in our home, suppose some tragedy takes place, it is a very big shock. So people don't emerge because it's very difficult, and for nations it is very difficult to emerge from the shocks, isn't it? Because oh, okay, this thing has happened. Okay, sometimes environmental threats are there. Sometimes this threat, that threat. So out of these shocks, a new paradigm is born. A new paradigm is born. As I told you, so this paradigm shift that you find from bipolar from bipolar world to unipolar world, because America emerged as the only superpower after the demise of the Soviet Union. So they enjoyed. I know it. There was a lot of rejoicement. Okay, now America is the only superpower in the world can dominate. But that didn't happen. That another shock, isn't it? It never thought or imagined, even in the wild dreams, that non-state actors. So in my book, I have mentioned that America could not and did not appreciate the rise of non-state actors, because all political theorists, all international relations theorists, they recognize the importance of state as the only unit, valid unit, not non-state actors, not individuals, isn't it? But in my book, I have mentioned that non-state actors now are very important part and parcel, isn't it, of international relations, international politics, or the international system, which I explained that America, so non-state actors, authoritarian regimes, they have been ignored. Scholars, they have ignored the study of non-state actors, authoritarian regimes, isn't it? For instance, for North Korea, there is a chapter on North Korean Geo-Psychology that you will find it interesting.
Right, sir.
That
So,
president,
for
yeah,
those who will view this video later on, would you please elaborate on the non-state actors in international relations? What would non-state actors, who would non-state actors be?
yeah,
Would it be the people of the nations or other than the people?
non-state actors is influential individuals in a political community. Okay, whether it is America, whether it is India, or whether it is China. Okay, so non-state actors were ignored by political scientists or by IR theories. They studied only state actors, but they did not study non-state actors. 9/11 took place, non-state actors, the role of non-state actors was there. They never
Yes,
imagined.
that's one aspect of the non-state actors. The non-state actors, those definitely do have a heavy impact on the policy that you have for a nation, or how the nations
Yeah,
collaborate together to develop a policy. With regard to that threat which you are talking about, let's be very express about it. You are talking about terrorists as non-state actors. But
yeah,
apart
yeah.
from that, the non-state actors would the capitalists, those
Maybe
would those
non-state actors, transnational actors,
right
NGOs, for instance, isn't it?
NGOs,
They also wield power, NGOs also,
right,
and so the corporate world. That is also the people who dominate economics. They dominate wealth, isn't it? Because they can. So that you can see in India
we'll
also.
come to that.
So they are non-state actors does not mean only terrorists. Non-state actors means transnational actors beyond nations, isn't it? Transnational actors. So the people from the corporate world, NGOs, isn't it? Multinational corporation, MNCs, isn't it? They have the influence on diplomacy, on foreign policy, on security policies that you can see in America, that you can see in the Middle East policy, US policy in Middle East reflects, the role of non-state actors, that is multinational companies, isn't it, in America, or the media which is run by a particular community, isn't it? So
Right, sir. So how does you talked in your book about the global hegemon, as you were talking about it, that the U.S. after it became a unipolar world, it was a bipolar world, then it became a unipolar world, and USA became the global hegemon. Then you talk about the cohort of powers, which I am given to understand that means NATO. Then they still, despite the being the hegemon, despite being a collaboration of very big powers, NATO also failed in Afghanistan. It also failed in Iraq. Then again in Middle East also as I'm talking, it failed in Iraq. How do you think that the psyche or the thought process of the regional and national actors has been the driving force between these interstate conflicts and these civil wars that are there already? In Algeria, in Libya, there were wars. So how do you understand that the psyche, the thought process that went there in the national and regional actors?
Yeah, that is very, very important. Now, this comes closer to the Russian thinking on Ukraine, isn't it? Or the Turkish thinking on Ukraine, isn't it? Now, what happened? This is very important because the geopsychology of the Russian elites and particularly Putin is very important to understand that America, that is America and the rest of the Western world did not recognize Russia as a power after the collapse of the Soviet Union, isn't it? So President Putin felt that Russia is being ignored by America, isn't it? Ignored by America, as well as uh, by a set of European powers, isn't it? As I told you, that history has played a very important role in the formation of geopsychology. So, Russian history tells very clearly that the 70th anniversary of victory last year in the World War II, they do remember it that Russia emerged victorious during the Second World War. Then 400th anniversary of the liberation of Moscow is very interesting, isn't it? From the Polish invaders, they have not yet forgotten, isn't it? And the special role of Russia in European and world history. Then Russia lost the Crimean War. Lost Russia lost the Crimean War of, if you remember it, of 1853 to 1856. So history has played an important role. Then the Russian Empire, isn't it? So there is still the imperial nostalgia, isn't it? Because Russia was a very big empire, the Soviet Union. So I call it, and the term which I have borrowed it, isn't it? That there is a imperial nostalgia. Because India did not have the strategy culture, and you know it very well, because we never developed strategy culture to deal with threats from the outside world, because you said because of our cultural disposition, isn't it? Because of our history. So I'm not going into so NATO's expansion as a matter of fact. In fact, the real reason is NATO's expansion eastward and denying geopolitical space to Russia and geographical space to geopolitical space to Russia was a major factor behind the launch of war in Ukraine. Okay. Now, America did not realize this mistake it had committed where in Afghanistan. It did not recognize. So, whether it is Libya, whether it is Iraq, they do not want that the aliens should dominate them. Now, this is the psyche of the people. You have raised a very crucial and very important question. That America had gone to Middle East, isn't it? What it did to Libya, what it did to Iraq, what it did to Afghanistan. So, in fact, American foreign policy makers assessment was that they would be welcomed by the people because we are bringing democracy in Iraq, isn't it? And we have liberated the people from the despotic rule of Saddam Hussein. They were proved wrong. They were proved wrong. America didn't understand, the people's psyche, isn't it? Their assessment, their understanding, and all that, So this is very important, and their sensibilities were hurt. Sensibilities were hurt because nationalism is also a very big force. Religion is also a very big force. It applies, applies to different regions, for instance. So sometimes religion plays an important role. Sometimes ethnicity is important place. What happened in Sri Lanka? That was the ethnic issues. Ethnic issues. Okay, so ethnicity also plays an important role. Sometimes religion also plays an important role. Sometimes nationalism that you find in Vietnam, you know that you find where ultra nationalism that you find in North Korea. Okay, so it is a cluster of the right elements, isn't it? That is religion, culture, ethnicity. Now geography is very important because American forces did not understand, the geographical terrain, very, very rugged terrain of Afghanistan. Okay, they didn't have any idea. Panjshir Valley, even Soviet Union could not dominate, it very well. So,
Yes.
so because foreign policy
Remained
makers what?
always insulated.
Yeah,
Panjshir always remained insulated.
yeah, you're right. Are you?
We were speaking, sir, about this, the American forces, how they came to be misled in because they didn't know the geographical terrain of the
Yeah,
place,
geographical. Yeah,
Pakistan.
they they should have made, a proper study of the history of Afghanistan. What happened to Britain? What happened to Russia? Isn't it? They could not dominate. Then it did not derive any lesson from the failure of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union had also stationed its forces, from December 79 to 89, almost, March, April, it withdrew forces in April 1989. So America should have learned the lesson, isn't it, from the Soviet Union. Okay, so geography is very, very important element of geopsychology. This is okay. Now, if we connect geography to the Ukrainian war, the same thing happens because America and other countries, isn't it? They are far off. America is far off, from Ukraine. It is sending weapons and all that. But Russia has the advantage of geographical proximity. Formerly, it was a part. Another important part, I will say that in Putin's perception, Ukraine, I'm quoting, Ukraine is inauthentic and inferior state. Now, this is the perception of Putin. I'm, I'm, I'm quoting under quote an in, inauthentic. It is not an authentic state. Inauthentic and inferior state, unworthy of sovereignty. Now, if he interprets Russia's purpose and role in the world politics through dominating others. So, when you are dealing with Russia, you must understand Putin's geopsychology. That is important. Rather than provoking him, because America is providing weapons and all that, I'm not in favor of, because ultimately it's a very small country and its infrastructure has been totally destroyed, isn't it now? And it will be ultimately, I will call it a phony victory, phony victory, isn't it? Even if some, whether it Russia emerges as a victorious power, or Zelensky is also talking about now that we should give chance to diplomacy, because diplomacy will ultimately help resolve uh, the conflict.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So where do you see in the compass, if you see in the compass, the Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine zone, the war zone, if we see on the compass, where do you think it is headed? I think it's headed for more of a stalemate because Mariupol has been taken back. Donetsk, the Ukrainian forces are making steady progress. That means Russia has not won over Ukraine. But can this war be won by Ukraine against Russia? Russia is a big power. They can last longer than Ukraine, even if we keep sending arms there.
So, my assessment and my evaluation is entirely different. It is not the question whether you are losing or whether you are winning. It was an unnecessary war which could have been easily avoided. Geopsychology, what geopsychology is that the wars which can be easily avoided, please try to avoid the war or violence or conflict in the very beginning, because war is not the solution until wherever. First World War happened, then peace treaty. Second World War happened, then again peace treaty. So ultimate outcome is peace through treaty, peace through negotiation. So here America should not have provoked the Ukrainian war. The Ukrainian why? Because it provided number one, you know, uh, number one, weapons. Okay, I will be providing all kind of sophisticated weapons. Number one. Secondly, what was the necessity? Why America wanted Ukraine or Finland or other Sweden or other country, isn't it? That you should
Yes.
be part of NATO. Why? Why NATO expansion? Because it was the question of the Russian security. That why do you come to my doorstep? Okay, I can't tolerate it. I can't tolerate it because you think that now I'm not a superpower and therefore now you can subdue me. That will not happen. That will not happen. So America should not have pursued that policy, as a matter of fact, by dragging, this issue of bringing Ukraine into NATO. What was the necessity? I'm asking the question because three Baltic states they are already the members of you know Baltic Baltic states. They are the members of NATO. Why?
Russian Federation.
Yeah, yeah. I visited that part in the conference, Latvia, Estonia. So here, America, as a matter of fact, provoked President Putin, and therefore he had to make the war effort. He planned the war, and ultimately he executed it. Now, what is who has been the loser? I'm just asking you, who is the main loser? The people of Ukraine, isn't it? It will
Right.
take, yeah, it will take. I do not know how many decades even to rebuild the economy, rebuild the infrastructure. Isn't it? People have suffered a loss, and refugees. They have become refugees. So people have to suffer. Wherever war takes place, conflicts will take place. People have to suffer, and especially women and children, isn't it? So in this
The
war, I think,
refugees.
yeah, this is not a good thing. Peace must be given
Right.
with a chance, and America has not really done a good thing by provoking President Zelensky. His uh, not as a matter of fact a petition because
Uh, would you agree that he is a hero by default?
America and its allies, they have made him a hero.
Yes, sir. Because yesterday I was watching the news. Even at Keynes, he got a standing ovation. But ultimately, it's the people who are suffering, and the war is not going anywhere. War is not the way to peace. That's
Yeah,
how we are
what,
going to get out of it because Russia is not backing out. Ukraine is not will not be able to defeat Russia in the long term or even in the short term, even if we keep sending weapons. So where are we headed? I think the soft diplomacy that should
uh,
be initiated now.
I should say that Russia's psychology, uh, you understand it because on 20th this month, Zelensky had said that it is diplomacy which can bring us to the negotiating table, and diplomacy is the only solution to ending the war in Ukraine. Very latest, 20th of this month. So,
But there is
Zelensky,
no progress on the diplomatic front. The NATO or even the European Union, all the leaders visited
yeah, you are right.
Ukraine, but they on diplomatic front they are not really inclined to negotiate with Russia.
They, because America and the European allies, its allies, they think that it is an opportunity to decimate Russia. It is their perception. Maybe right or false. I can't say because when it's outcome. And now this is an opportunity, isn't it? So for them, it is a kind of political experiment because they are making a political experiment in Ukraine. That now this is an opportunity. Let us provide, weapons, morale booster diplomacy, morale booster diplomacy. It was called, by one newspaper. It's not my term. So now they are boosting the morale of Zelensky, but Zelensky himself has reiterated on several occasions that we may or may not emerge victorious, but it is a patent fact. It is a patent fact that our people will suffer the most. Our people have suffered the most. He has realized it. Now it is very difficult to get out of this imbroglio. When that sort of
Right.
situation is created, once you are involved in a particular situation, now it is very difficult to get out of it. How to get out of it, isn't it?
Exactly.
Even if Zelensky wants it. So there could have been a better, because in the very beginning, I do remember Putin had said, okay, you give us the guarantee that you will not become the member
Not
of
join
NATO.
NATO.
You will not join NATO. Very simple. Okay, why? Because you cannot afford to antagonize your neighbor, isn't it?
Exactly.
Your neighbor. That
Exactly.
that
But
is,
that time he did not negotiate with Russia. That time he did not accept
yeah, it was
those.
very simple at that time. The situation,
Was very aggressive.
yeah, he was very aggressive. So you said that he has been made a hero. So
But a question comes to my mind since you talked about this Russia becoming a new power in that region. So, in order to antagonize and, in fact, subdue Russia as a emerging power in the region, uh, China is also there. And China and Russia are building equations in the region, which is again antagonistic to USA. In order to keep down China, they went into Russia. Went into Russia. Well, how do you see this equation, sir? The Russia-China relationship in respect
uh,
of US.
it's a very good question, Rasha. Now, in power configuration, what happens? Two sets of power. One set of power is led by America, okay, and the another set of power is led by Russia and China. And I would definitely include the third power, that is North Korea. Okay. Now, what happens? These three countries, Russia, China, and North Korea, they are against the U.S. hegemony. I don't like this word hegemony, but anyway, I'm using it again. They do not. You do remember that President Donald Trump had to meet President Un, Kim Jong Un, isn't it?
He did.
Uh, a guy of 34 or 35 years age, and I had you know built up an argument in my book that had President George Bush agreed to meet his father at the time, who was ruling in North Korea. Nu- Nuclear threat could have been avoided. Nuclear, arsenal that was at the time was in the very initial stage, isn't it? Very initial stage could have been nipped in the bud. But President George Bush said and described North Korea as an axis of power, as an axis of power. Iran was also described as an axis of power, isn't it? As rogue state. We are creating unnecessary enemies in the world politics. These people don't understand that why we should nickname as rogue state. You as president, you are directly challenging them. And this is how Kim Jong Un, after the death of his father in 2011 or 12, what happened? He threatened America with nuclear weapons and missiles. Okay. So this is the soaring idealism. I use for soaring nationalism, as in India we call it soaring idealism of Nehru, inverted commas. Soaring idealism of Nehru, and here is the soaring nationalism. So that is, hyper nationalism is a factor that bind the people, isn't it? So that is very important, and therefore China and Russia. But Chinese diplomacy, if you want to understand on China, Henry Kissinger's book, because Henry Kissinger visited China more than 50, 60 times, and he is the real architect of détente with China. You know it very well.
He's
That
written
Henry Kissinger,
extensively on China.
yeah,
Henry Kissinger has written extensively on China, the
yeah,
Chinese diplomacy. But
yeah,
since we are discussing the nuclear aspect of it, the nuclear deterrence, so is there something like nuclear psychology that acts as a deterrence?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, psychology I discussed in my book, Nuclear Politics in South Asia. It was published in 1994, and there I have mentioned psychocultural complexes, isn't it?
Please
That
elaborate it for us.
yeah. So in the case of South Asia, or in the case of Northeast Asia, or in the case of Northeast Asia, whether it is Japan or whether it is China or whether it is Northeast Asia, sorry, North Korea, nuclear psychology is a very powerful factor, very very strong factor, very potential factor in boosting, weapon building, missile building, okay, nuclear weapons building. Why? Because nuclear psychology. Okay. I do remember, because Bhutto had said when Bangladesh was born in 1971, and Bhutto had made a clarion call that Pakistan must make a nuclear bomb, even if we have to eat grass. You, do you remember it? So this is a new nuclear psychology, that we can fight war for hundreds and years and all that. Emotional outbursts, isn't it? Emotional outburst. So that nuclear psychology really, at that time, he had appealed to Dr. A.Q. Khan, who left Holland, isn't it? And he came to Pakistan, and he had trained, the army of nuclear weapon building. So this is how. So nuclear psychology is very important now. Also in the case of Russia, nuclear psychology plays a very very dominant role, because when America had threatened Russia at the time, said that I am going to build up new typology of nuclear weapons, isn't it? New typology of missiles. Okay, so that will definitely work. Same thing is there, because it is ultimately the psychology of the people, or the psychology of the ruling elite, psychology of non-state actors, psychology of different political communities. Ultimately, have the influence on the foreign policy and decision making of the ruling elites. That please, we want nuclear weapons. Now in Japan, I had gone to Tokyo for a lecture in Tokyo International University. There, their students, they were of the opinion that Japan must make nuclear weapons. Can you believe? Japan must, because their constitution is based on peace. Peace. that is known as Peace Constitution, Japan. But now the new voices are emerging, young, boys, girls, and youths. They are asking for that. Why we should depend on America? We should depend on the nuclear umbrella of America? Because we have the technological know-how. We can make nuclear bomb, okay, so that we can ensure our security, national security. So national security is a very important factor, or deeply etched in the psyche of the people. National security is important. Now people in Japan or in South Korea are also, they are telling the same thing, that had we built up the nuclear weapons, North Korea could not have issued the threats to us that we will wipe out North Korea and Japan from the world map.
So that two things emerge from what you are saying, sir. That nuclear deterrence is very, very important for national security of any nation. So it's if you have the nuclear weapon with you, the other any aggressive nation will not will not uh, conquer, will
Okay,
not
we have
come and aggress a nation, another nation, will not
it
disturb
will
the
depend.
peace of the
Yeah,
nation. That means two things
yeah,
come here, sir. The two things come here,
yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Ukraine had nuclear capability, but then they forwent that nuclear capability. And second point is that Iran was building the nuclear capability, which they say that it's only for peaceful purposes, and we are building only the nuclear power plants to supply the energy, the electricity. It's not the nuclear weapons that we are building. Then shouldn't Iran have nuclear capability if this is a deterrent, if this is the means to peace?
No, I don't subscribe to this viewpoint. Nuclear deterrence has become an outdated concept. American scholars, they have written extensively on nuclear deterrence in order to justify nuclear weapon building, isn't it? Uh, but its reaction is always negative. Its outcome is always negative, because nuclear weapons are cannot and are not to be used, isn't it? But but I'm saying, but I'm using the word but, in an unprecedented situation. What is that unprecedented situation? When national security is threatened seriously. National security is threatened seriously by the outside power or by any configuration of power. A nuclear weapon power can use nuclear weapons. There is no guarantee that you have got the nuclear weapons, I possess nuclear weapons, so therefore there will be no nuclear war. It is absolutely wrong. In the case of North Korea, why, the meeting took place between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And I have mentioned in my book that from that angle, uh, Donald Trump is a great geopsychologist. In order to avert the possibility of nuclear war, because King Jong Un had threatened America with nuclear missiles. Okay, that I will destroy your bases where in Guam. I will destroy, completely eliminate Japan and South Korea, your great ally, isn't it? And he realized it. Trump realized it, and I appreciate his initiative that he went to meet twice. He met twice, Kim Jong Un, and he appreciated his spirit. That he's a great guy. He's a great guy. He's a very intelligent guy. Something of the sort. When you praise something, okay. So this is also a case study that nuclear tragedy was averted. That was not a small accomplishment. It was not a small achievement, isn't it? So this is how diplomacy functions through geopsychology. in geopsychology, diplomacy functions. Diplomacy functions provided provided actors, non-state actors, they all play their respective roles in the process of peacemaking process. Their role cannot be denied. You cannot say that a beggar does not have any influence, so we should not bother. They should not be treated as beggars, or they should not be treated as rogue state. So because it's a very complex situation in international politics that now no power can afford to create, though America has created that situation, ultimately cannot afford to create conditions for war instead of peace. No country, no superpower, including America, can afford. American people have
Right.
realized it. They are also tired of it. They are not in favor of that. America should extend its hegemony throughout the globe.
Exactly. I would agree with you that no one wants war because the expenses and costs of war are very, very high. Then we have another kind of warfare, sir, the psychological warfare, information
Psychological,
warfare.
yeah.
Kindly elaborate on that, since your subject deals with this, the psychology of war. So, where does what's how would you elaborate on this? The geo-psychological warfare. In present times, we have seen misinformation campaigns, the media campaigns, even in the Russia-Ukraine context, we can see there's a flood of information coming out, and we are unable to see find the truth, what's true, what's happening really at the ground level. So, how would you discuss psychological warfare in the present context? What's the
It's not a
significance of
problem.
psychology?
It's not audible. Hello,
Hello, sir.
hello, hello,
Sir, am I audible?
hello. Ha, yeah. Please go.
Sir,
Yeah, there was some interruption there.
I was asking you about the psychological warfare, sir. What's the significance of psychological warfare, sir? Because
Yeah,
the
it's
costs
a,
of war are very high now.
yeah, this is, the psychological warfare is the part of politics, international politics. It has always been there. Uh, whether you take up the case history of Hitler, isn't it? Whether you take up the case history of Stalin, isn't it all? So, and they are trained in psychological warfare. What is psychological warfare? It is a propaganda warfare, as a matter of fact. Okay. Now, in this propaganda warfare, people are confused, policymakers are confused. But ultimately, psychological warfare does not function effectively when you assess its outcome. Sometimes psychological warfare functions, but now in the age of information technology, it is very difficult to perpetuate the psychological warfare. It used to be, because I have books, on Soviet psychological warfare, okay, 70s or 80s psychological warfare. A complete book is there on psychological warfare. But now there is nothing secret about the psychological warfare in the age of information, in the age of internet, in the so psychological warfare now has a limited it has a very limited role, because when you spread propaganda, isn't it, exaggerating that we are winning, this sort of, you adopt different kind of strategies in order to confuse the adversary or the enemy. But now there are so many channels of getting correct information. Now, this is an age where misinformation or disinformation are less likely to work. Less likely to work. Whether you see, even in the case of China now, what happened in Hong Kong, isn't it? China launched a kind of psychological warfare against the people, but it did not succeed. Because now everything, because your now actions, your studies are exposed. You can't hide. Now it is very, very difficult. Now China can't hide that it is not the sufferer of the COVID-19. That no, there is not a single case. You can't hide the fact. Even if you launch, the psychological warfare. No, we are the winners. This thing. So now it has a very, very limited role. Though it has a role, but it has very limited role in the age of information. Where people are enlightened, the technology has changed the character of internet systems. I should, because there is a very good article on technology and internet system. Technology has changed the very nature of internet system. You cannot,
That,
yeah,
that's the positive side of the information flood of information that we have.
yeah,
What
yeah.
about misinformation, sir? How does misinformation come in, sir? Because there's a flood of misinformation also. That's also that, as you said, confuses the people. So, how,
Yeah,
in the light of that misinformation, how are we supposed to move forward in international relations?
yeah, internet relations. So here we are talking about democracies. That in democracies you get information, through white papers, for instance. White papers recently published by Australia, by Britain, on Indo-Pacific region, isn't it? So it is possible in democratic regimes, you can't hide facts, but in authoritarian regimes, it's very difficult. Even, let me tell you that how will you do your research on China without the help of
The
books,
authoritarian.
books, written by American publishers or by British publishers, isn't it? Because they have lot of, you know, mm, lot of they have done a lot of new exercises in the field of seeking information, because they are hiring Chinese scholars. They are hiring, native Chinese. You know it very well that America is hiring, native Chinese. They are getting jobs. Indians are not getting jobs in America because we don't have any importance of Hindi speaking people. But if you are speaking Chinese, okay, you will have the value. Okay, we will hire you as a lecturer or as a researcher.
So China is a greater threat than India. India does not pose any threat. India is an ally.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
China is not an ally. China is a competitor.
Yeah, right. Because China, they have already described that China is they're a strategic competitor, isn't it? America does not see any threat from India.
Right, sir.
And that's good.
And
So,
recently, we have seen, despite the furor in the international arena, that India did not say anything against the Russian aggression. Still, we saw the American delegations coming to India. We have
it's
seen allies coming to India.
it's a good diplomacy. It's a good diplomacy that way. Why do you antagonize Russia? Isn't it? Because
But that's
America has been trying very hard that India should not depend too much on Russia for weapons and all that. And recently it has offered F-35, isn't it? F-18 and all the latest sophisticated weapons to India that you can have. The purpose is that because defense cooperation started in 2005. Defense agreement took place between India and the United States in 2005, and America has benefited. Okay, after Russia, it became the second arms exporter to India. Okay,
I think
so
I'm taking too much of your time also. Is it
yeah,
okay, sir? We continue.
nice. Yes, I am very glad.
Thank you so
Uh,
much, sir.
that you have so much of knowledge and
Thank
despite
you,
your
sir.
legal
Coming from you, sir, I
background,
really feel elated.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy. So please spread the word. Please spread the word. Geo-psychology, wherever you get the chance. But there में मत
Surely,
करो.
sir.
Okay. हाँ, नहीं, doesn't matter.
I, I
So
would like to
so
ask you, sir, something with regard to this, the geopsychological concept only. Do you think democracy is geo-psychospecific to certain regions? So do you think democracy is geo-psychospecific to certain regions?
Democracy, yes, it is also there
Because
because
in East we see they are
history,
very happy with the autocratic regimes. They
yeah,
don't ever raise
there, yeah, that is why I have concluded in my study that America should not impose regimes. Okay, if people want, okay, the kind of regime, whatever the kind of regime they have, America should not impose its democratic regime formula. People are rejecting some democratic voices because when you give freedom to the people in the name of freedom, now what is in the young generation, what is important that I have seen in Hong Kong, that we are not interested in ideology. We are interested in a regime that guarantees us a quality life. A quality life. People of Hong Kong have said, no, we reject, we are not interested in ideological beliefs. We are not interested in Maoism, isn't it? We are not interested in the so-called Xi Jinping's ideology. We are interested to have a good life, isn't it? Quality of life, isn't it? We want freedom, we want liberty. That is there. But in in certain regimes or in certain geographical areas, isn't it? People do not want that aliens should dominate us. This is the geopsychology. Aliens should not dominate us. Who are they to tell us? Isn't it? Who are they to impose their regimes on us? They may like democracy. They may like democracy, but they do not like imported democracy. Isn't it? So that is the whole thing. So it is very nice you remain in touch, and I'm very happy that you have
thank
asked
you so
very,
much.
very important questions and very difficult questions also. I
Sure.
enjoyed talking.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much, sir. Thank you. I learned a lot from you, especially with regard to this geopsychology of international relations. This was, I was introduced to this concept, and it was a pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I'll take
okay.
your leave, sir. I'll have you another time, sir, discussing more on the issue. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much.
yeah, we will continue talking, isn't it now? Skype is there, and you have given me the chance, the opportunity to share my thoughts, And have you recorded it?
Yes, sir, I have recorded. I'll be
Okay,
sending you the recording, sir. But it's a very long session, 1 hour and 8 minutes, I think. So I'll share it with
okay,
you.
okay. Will you sending this
I
recording
will
as
share
well?
it on my profile, sir. I'll share it on my profile. I'll send it to you via link. I don't
Okay,
think the mail will be possible because this is a very big file. So after
okay,
I'll go through it, I'll see if there's some necessary editing to be done. After that, I'll send it.
okay,
Or I'll post it on my channel, sir. After that, I'll send you the link.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Take care, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you again.